Preface and Chapter 1 of 87 by Pansy. This is recorded to celebrate the 8th anniversary of LibriVox. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.
87 by Pansy. Preface. Class of 87, greeting. Dear classmates, having journeyed through the years together and accomplished the 4 years' course of reading, as we are now about to part company, I come to you with the promised book dedicated to our class. I have taken great pleasure in writing it, and hope most earnestly that it will be to you a pleasant souvenir of our alma mater. Perhaps just here is the appropriate place in which to thank many hundreds of you for the helpful letters which you sent to aid me in the preparation of our book. That they were decided helps, you, the writers, have only to read the book to be convinced, for the incidents found therein were taken from your own letters, which contain statements of facts. I have simply grouped within a few lives the actual experiences of many. It was my earnest desire to write a book for the 87s which should, in a slight degree at least, illustrate the manner in which helping hands might be extended by members of the CLSC, reaching lives where they least expected, and setting in motion influences which should tell for eternity. It is not the least of my pleasures that, in writing this book, I have been able to leave the region of plain fiction and revel in the realm of facts. It is delightful to be able to say to you that wherever you may chance to find suggestive hints through the book as to ways of helping, you may understand that it is not theory, but practice, not what might possibly be done, but what has been done, by the members of the class of 87, though in order to make the dates of my story symmetrical, I have been obliged to remove many of the doings of the 87s back into the past, thus apparently giving the honor to the classes of 84, 85, and 86, which properly belong to the 87s. But this you will understand. And now, trusting that we who gather in the classic groves of the Mother Chautauqua may have the honor of passing through the Golden Gate together, and hoping and praying that not only we who gather there, but all the great company of those faithful ones who must of necessity abide at home, may meet one day, and pass under the flowery arches of our Father's love, through the Golden Gate of the Celestial City, to go no more forever, I subscribe myself, yours in the Master's service and reward, Pansy. Chapter 1, 8 and 12. They were both barefooted and, to all intents and purposes, bareheaded. She carried in her hand a much faded little old-fashioned sunbonnet, the strings of which had been chewed a little and then smoothed out, as though the chewer were penitent. He tossed carelessly from hand to hand, or occasionally pitched a long way ahead of him, a much soiled, much torn, nearly rimless straw hat. Her dress was of faded pink calico, and was rapidly growing too short, as to sleeves as well as skirt. It was clean, that is comparatively, but the elbows were much patched with material which had not faded, and the effect was marked. As to the boy's attire, perhaps the least said about it the better. That he was outgrowing it in all directions, that it tore on the slightest provocation, and that there was no careful hand to patch and sponge and brush for him, were self-evident truths. However, neither of these, to judge by their faces, took much thought for clothes. They sauntered along the sometimes sandy, sometimes grassy lake shore, stopping quite often to dig with their bare toes attractive-looking holes in the damp sand, or to shy a pebble at a darting fish. Between times they talked, grave, old-fashioned talk, some of it, revealing by the very words in which they expressed themselves that already some of the shadows of life's stern realities had fallen on them. Yet some of the talk was childish in the extreme, indicating the constant bubbling forth of youth and light-heartedness, despite the weight of some burdens. "It's pretty here," the girl said, stopping suddenly to look up to the very top of one of the grand old trees, stretching her neck back and shading her brown eyes from the sun's rays, and looking up and up beyond the trees into the blue sky dotted here and there with delicate filmy clouds. "I think it is just lovely through here, and I think this is a lovely day. It always is nice on my birthday. Isn't that queer? Mother says she doesn't ever remember my having a rainy birthday." They had left the lake now and climbed one of the hills, where the trees were tall and so close together that their branches interlocked, forming lovely arches for the sun to glorify. "It is very nice," the boy said simply, in answer to his companion, but whether he meant the place, or the birthday, or the fact of there always being sunshine on that day, he did not explain. The little girl was full of the thought. "This is my birthday walk, you know. Isn't it nice that you could take it with me, and that we could come way out here to the spot I like the best? Mother won't let me come alone. She is afraid of bears or snakes or something. I ain't afraid," with fine superiority lighting up her great brown eyes. "But then she is a woman, you know, and women always get afraid of things. I wonder why." Dreamy silence for half a minute while she tries to settle this problem, then she is off again. "Oh, Win, we had a talk this morning, Mother and I, a kind of birthday talk. Mother said when she was a little girl she liked the woods and trees and everything just as I do, and she meant to study and learn all about them, out of books, you know, but she couldn't. Grandfather got very poor, and then he got sick, and then he died, and then Grandmother died, and there was nothing but trouble, Mother said, for years and years. Oh, wouldn't it be dreadful to have one's mother and father? Oh, poor Win, I'm so sorry. I didn't think, and it was mean of me. I ought to think."
"Never mind," said the boy, struggling with a sort of choking feeling which he did not himself understand. "I don't remember any mother at all, but I do father just a little. Go on, I like to hear about it."
"Well, I'll skip all the hard, and tell you when Mother was 22 years old. That was her happy day, she said. She was married to Father the day she was 22, but dear me, I wouldn't like to be married as Mother was. Just in a kitchen with her old calico dress on, and no cake nor anything, and nobody to kiss her and cry. I told her I thought somebody always cried about brides. I read it in a storybook once, but she laughed at me and said there was nobody to cry over her, only herself, and she did a little, for joy. She was so glad to go away from that place. They didn't belong to her, and they didn't care for her, any of them. I'd have been glad, too, to go with Father, you know. Mother said when I was 22 she would give me a happy day if she could, a regular feast day. I said maybe I would be married on that day just as she was, and she laughed again, and said then she would do the crying maybe. Isn't it queer to think that if I live, one of these days I'll be 22?
"That's a long way off, Vine."
"Not so very. I counted it up with Mother this morning. Mother's birthday and mine come the same time. Isn't that nice? Mother is 40 years old today. Mustn't it seem strange to be 40 years old? I'll tell you what year I will be 22. It will be 1887.
"Then we'll write it," said the boy, "on this old tree." And he took from a ragged pocket a battered and bruised jackknife with 2 broken blades, and with much patience and care cut into the jagged bark of one of the great trees the inscription, "Vine, 22, 1887.
"It is a good many years to wait," said Vine reflectively. "It looks more when it is printed out. I wonder what Mother will do to celebrate it. I told her I wanted a cake and some baked potatoes, and when I said I wanted you to come to tea. Oh, that reminds me. It is very queer I forgot it. I'm going to have a little bit of a tea party tonight. No cake," shaking her head gravely, "because eggs are so dear, you know, but the potatoes will be lovely. I picked them out myself and washed them before I came away, nice big ones, all of a size, and you are to come to supper when this very night."
"I can't," said the boy gloomily. "It was almost as much as my head was worth to get off for this walk. I've worked like 60 ever since daylight, before daylight for that matter, to get this chance, and if I'm not home before milking time I wouldn't give much for my skin."
"Oh, poor Win, I say it is too mean for anything," and the brown eyes blazed. "And you can't come to my birthday after all, when there's a potato picked out for you and washed and everything, and Mother has a little treat in a dish. I don't know what it is, but it will be nice. Oh, Win, couldn't you? Wouldn't they let you just for my birthday?"
The boy gravely shook his head. "They don't care a thing about birthdays, and they'd rather disappoint me than not any time." His face was growing hard over the thought, stern lines about the mouth and an angry sullenness in his eyes, but Vine's brown eyes were brimming with tears, and seeing this he instantly turned comforter. "Never mind, Viney, it won't be so very long to wait. I'll come to the other supper. No Mr. Josiah Griggs in all the world can keep me from it. Just think, Viney, I'll be 26 years old."
"A great tall man," said Vine, "as tall as Father. Oh, how funny to think of!" and she laughed out gleefully. At 8 years of age, tears and laughter may come very close together. "But I don't want to wait," and already the voice was growing tremulous again. "I might not like you nearly so well, you see. Perhaps I might even be afraid of you. Will you wear a collar that stands up all around, do you suppose, like Deacon Slocum's? Oh, and will you have whiskers over your face? And I'll call you Mr. Winter, I suppose, or Mr. Kelland. That is the way they do. Oh, Win, how very funny to think of it all. I could never say Mr. Kelland. Do you believe I could? Win, why did your mother give you such a queer name? My mother was wondering about it the other day. She said she never heard of anybody named Winter before."
"Father named me," said the boy, a tender sadness spreading over his face, such as always came when he spoke the names Father and Mother. "He said Mother dreaded the long winter so much, and she never lived to see it. She thought so much about it that he gave me the name, because it made him think of her, and because she escaped." This last was added in an undertone, as though it were a thought beyond little Vine. She was considering the matter, though, with her head dropped a little to one side like a canary bird's. It was a pretty, thoughtful way she had.
"I like winter," she said at last. "I like the snow. It's so white, and the cold and everything.
The evenings are so nice and long, and it is warm and pleasant in our kitchen, and sometimes we roast apples, and a few times I pop some corn. Then I like to go to school through the snow and to slide downhill. Oh, Win, won't you and I have fun together next winter?" The boy shivered and frowned. "I hate winter," he said fiercely. "It is so awfully cold everywhere. The coldest place in the world is our attic. You can't possibly get clothes enough over you to keep from shivering. At least I can't with the clothes I can get hold of. If I were manager of the bedclothes, I'd try for it."
"Mother comes and tucks me in," said Vine, surveying him with thoughtful gravity, "and then I'm always warm."
Whereat the boy laughed almost fiercely. "Mrs. Josiah Griggs doesn't," he said, with a toss of his head and a flush on his face. The troubled thought which Vine had been considering for some minutes now came to the surface in hesitating speech.
"Win, isn't she, well, is she good to you?"
Whispered those last words as though the possibilities they contained were dreadful to think about. "Oh, good enough," said Winter, with another toss of his head. "I don't have much to do with her, nor she with me, only to scold, but I get used to that. She doesn't do any tucking up or that sort of thing, and I don't want her to. I'd kick all the bedclothes off in a hurry that she tucked."
"Yes," said Vine a little hesitatingly, "I suppose so, because you are a boy."
"It isn't that. It's because I wouldn't want her to do things that were any like Mother's, you know, when she isn't Mother and never can be, and nobody ever wants her to be." Vine nodded. She could readily understand that a boy would not care to have Mrs. Josiah Griggs for his mother. Winter returned to the subject of schools. "I don't know about next winter. I don't believe I'm to go to school. I heard them talking the other day, Mr. Josiah and Mrs. Josiah, planning work for me which sounded as though it was to take all my time. I don't see where the school is to get put in."
"Oh, but," said Vine in dismay, "that would be horrid. Why, every boy goes to school in winter. Didn't they promise to you?"
"Yes, of course. 3 months of schooling every year. But promises don't signify. Who's to complain if they don't keep them? Nobody cares but a boy without friends, and they don't care how much I complain. I don't know as it matters. School doesn't amount to much with me, Vine. When a fellow has to work up to the minute for starting, and set to work the minute he gets back, and hasn't books that he ought to study, and gets behind with all his classes, and doesn't understand things, and hasn't time to stop and ask questions, why, school is a kind of a humbug. Except for giving you rides at recess, and taking you home on the sled at night, I don't know but I'd as soon be at work." But over this decision Vine shook her shapely brown head violently.
"Oh, no, that wouldn't do at all, because you are going to be a man, and I want you to be a real smart man. I'm to call you Mr. Kelland, you know, and every little bit of study helps a little. I couldn't call you Mr. Kelland unless you were a smart man, now could I?"
The boy burst into a merry laugh, the first real outburst of boyishness which there had been. "Why not?" he said. "Aren't people who haven't been to school ever called Mister?" Vine shook her head again.
"Oh, no, no, indeed. They say Win or Wint and old Wint when your hair begins to get gray. I wouldn't allow it, Win. This is my name for you while you were a boy, but I wouldn't want to say old Win ever."
The brightness faded from the boy's face. "Don't call me Wint," he said. "I hate that name. There's something about your little name for me which sounds pleasant. It makes me feel once in a while as though I should win something yet, though everything is against me. But Wint! Every hateful boy I know yells it out at the beginning or end of some ugly speech, and Mrs. Josiah never pretends to call me anything else." As they talked, they wandered on through the thickly matted carpet of brush and twigs, and came out now upon a little clearing, where the grass was greener and a view of the lake could be had, glimmering through the great old trees. Here stood 2 men, gazing about them with an air of interest. "I should think this would be a good site," one said, as the children came into view. "I should like to put up a building for them just in this angle." "Do you suppose it will really amount to putting up buildings?" asked the other. "Why, of course it will. The association is already formed and some capital secured. The people who are pushing it command influence and money. Oh, I have no doubt of its eventual success."
"It's a camp meeting," said Vine, nudging her companion's elbow to call attention to the talk. "One day we were coming to it, but Father was too busy. Mother can't walk so far. I'd like to come, it is such a pretty place. But camp meetings don't have anything nice for children, do they?"
"No," said Winter. "Nothing but sermons that I ever heard of. But I don't know much about them. Mr. Griggs wouldn't let me come because he didn't believe in encouraging laziness and late hours. I wonder what they are talking about it now for. It's over for this year."
"Maybe they are going to build a church or something, and to work at it this winter. It would be fun to come out here once in a while and watch them, wouldn't it, Win? Let's ask them what they are going to build. Do you know who they are?"
"Never saw them before."
"Well, never mind. You can step right up to them and talk, just as though you knew them. Men always do that. Father talked with a man all the way home from the pasture the other night, and when I asked him who he was, he said he never saw him before."
The boy laughed good-humoredly. You have a great idea of making a man of me, haven't you, little Vine? All right, I'll help it along when I can. Here goes." And the two moved toward the gentleman.
End of Preface and Chapter 1 of 87 by Pansy.